Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Jenny and Paul, for inviting me to give this talk at the Manchester Game Studies Network. I'm very excited to be with all of you today and very happy to have such a big audience, including I would say, the greatest experts on playing knucklebones and board games. I must start with warnings, so the level of my talk will be popular in order to be enjoyable for non-experts. And the other warning is that this is a relatively new topic for me. So this is, I cannot say I'm an expert in knucklebones. Also, as you know, in the UK, we are in lockdown, our third lockdown. So the access to libraries is not great at the moment. But having said that, I hope you will find the talk enjoyable. So my talk will be an overview of knucklebones in Egypt and in the Greco-Roman world. But I just wanted to mention why I'm looking at knucklebones specifically in my research. So apart from all the things that Jenny said, I've also just very recently started a new project, a part of which will also include a study of funerary sets from tombs of girls and young women in Greco-Roman Egypt, Greece, and Italy between the 5th century BC and the 4th century AD. And knucklebones and terracottas of knucklebone players are part of several funerary sets in classical and Hellenistic Greece and Italy. So this is one of the interests. And currently, I'm also interested in the iconography of some decorated knucklebones from Greco-Roman Egypt. I won't talk about this specifically today. So as I said, mine will be a more general overview, but it's just to give you a bit of an idea of why I'm doing this. So I would start really from the basics. So what is a knucklebone? Today, I'm talking about knucklebones in the ancient world. And so this is an apparently humble gaming piece. But what is it? It's a bone, as the name suggests. It's called Astragalus in Greek, talus in Latin. And if we want to place it anatomically, it's a part of the hind leg in four-footed mammals, such as a sheep or a goat. And this is also where mostly they came from. The astragali have 4 sides. I found this because I'm not an expert in bones, some of you may be. They have a dorsal, a medial, a plantar, and a lateral view. There's also ancient names for this. If you're curious, we can go into this bit later. So the astragali could be used for 2 kinds of games. So games of skill, where they were used like a gaming piece. In this case, their sides did not have a particular value, and knucklebones could also be easily replaced by other types of gaming piece, such as, or even nuts, really. And while in other games, the 4 sides of the knucklebone were given a specific value. And so we're given a specific, just like the sides of a die. And here you can see, for example, the numeric value given to knucklebones in Greek and Roman games. 1, 3, 4, 6 points, with the exclusion of the numbers 2 and 5. The different combinations of numeric values were seen as better or worse according to the probability of the throw. And the least probable throw was the one where all the sides of the knucklebone were different. This throw was called of Aphrodite or of Venus, while the worst throw was called of the dog, and it named a combination of the 4 knucklebones falling on the same side. So the knucklebones could be found in various areas of the ancient world, but I will focus on examples from Egypt and the Greco-Roman world particularly. Otherwise, we would be here until tonight. I know some of you are already from parts of the world where it's either very early or very late. So, so what can we say? It was a game piece that was generally undecorated, but sometimes it presented decorations that suggested its value, especially when it was used as a die. It was mostly played on its own, but sometimes it was used as a randomizing device, especially in board games. We will mainly focus on its function of game piece, but we will also have to look beyond games, because in Egypt, Greece, and the Roman world, knucklebones were somehow ritualized and became associated with votive and funerary contexts. Greek sources suggest that in some circumstances, the ritualization may derive from the importance that these pieces had for their young owners. And we will see that some Greek words in some sources express the strong feelings that these young knucklebones players were feeling when they were playing with knucklebones. But I don't anticipate anything. So in the 5th century BC, Herodotus credits the Lydians with the invention of the game of knucklebones, while Plato attributes the invention of knucklebones to the Egyptians, and in particular to the Egyptian god Thoth. So is Plato right? Did the Egyptians introduce the knucklebones? It is possible that the Egyptians invented the board game of senet, a game with 30 squares, which is known in Egypt for a very long time. However, the knucklebones were not an Egyptian invention, but rather a Near Eastern import, added as dice to the pre-existing senet board game only in the Second Intermediate period, so from about 1600 BC, when they started to be used as randomizing devices as an alternative to the more traditional 4 throw sticks. Like the sticks, the 2 Egyptian knucklebones were assigned numeric values, and such sums were used by the players to advance their game pieces on the board. The maximum number of points was for the sticks was 5. So the sum of all 4 falling on the flat side plus 1. This is what is suggested by an article by Piccione. And according to Piccione, you could achieve the same number with the 2 knucklebones because the throwing sticks and knucklebones were used interchangeably until the 19th dynasty. So you can find lots of reconstructions of the rules of the senet game, the Egyptian senet game online. So I won't go too much in detail here, also because my focus today is on the knucklebones rather than the senet. But I recommend the reconstruction by the Oriental Institute of Chicago, from which I took the picture of this board. And as you can see, there are 2 players, and each player had 5 gaming pieces each, which were advanced according to a sort of S movement on the squares. The aim was to advance all the game pieces out of the board before the other player did. And game pieces could displace each other, and they could end up on special squares, which had the special rules. You can see 15, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30. Just to give you an example, if your token ended its move on square 15, the player had to place their token back to square 1 at the start of the game board. As I said, I won't go in detail, but we can go back to this. So the game senet was attested at least from the 3rd millennium BC. It means passing, and this suggests a connection with the journey of the soul through the underworld. However, a scholar called Peter Piccione argued that when this game first appeared in the Old and Middle Kingdom, the senet was simply a secular board game with no particular religious or ritual meaning. All of this seems to have changed in the New Kingdom, or just before, when some of the squares of the senet boards acquired symbols alluding to the gaming pieces' journey through the underworld. This transformation of the game corresponds with the time when senet started to include the knucklebones, although it is not clear whether there is a connection between these 2 changes. Senet boards with knucklebones were increasingly included and represented in funerary contexts. For instance, the tomb of Tutankhamun contained 4 senet boards and 5 knucklebones. 2 paintings from the tomb 2219 of the officer Neben Mat represent him playing senet with his wife and casting 2 bones each. Tate also observed that in all the Middle Kingdom, senet appears to be played mainly by adult men, while in these New Kingdom funerary representations, it also often involves women, such as the wives, and sometimes servant girls. So what happens though in knucklebones in the late dynastic and Ptolemaic period? Were they still part of the senet boards? So if we look at the senet boards, what happens to them? The latest datable boards came from the 26th dynasty fortress at Tel de Fenne, where 3 senet games were scratched into terracotta platters, which are now the British Museum. The last senet board was represented in the 4th century BC tomb of the priest of Thoth, Osiris, in Tuna el Gebel, which this priest lived under the time of Ptolemy I. And according to Piccione, though, even this representation could be more of an artistic trope rather than the attestation of the existence of the senet in this period. So what we can say is that we don't know whether the senet survived until the Ptolemaic period, but knucklebones definitely survived and continued to be produced independently from the game of senet. I could mention quite a few Greco-Roman images and sources, though, which have been and are currently interpreted as attestation of senet just because of their Egyptian setting. A Roman survival of senet could be this very small lapislazuli magical gem encased in silver, which represents the god of the dead Anubis playing a board game with a man. This image could be compared with a scene from a New Kingdom satirical papyrus where a gazelle plays against a lion. In both the cases, the themes of gambling and risk are clear. So this is probably an amulet that protects the owner. However, Veronique Dazin recently and convincingly interpreted this game as the Roman alea, a backgammon game, where the dice were cast through a box shaped like a tower, and you can see Anubis holding it. We also have 2 stories of dice game, one by Herodotus and one by Plutarch, which don't mention explicitly the senet board game, nor the use of knucklebones, but they are often associated with it because, with both the senet and the knucklebones, because of the Egyptian context of the story. So Herodotus mentions that a pharaoh called Ramsinitus, so perhaps Ramesses III, traveled to the underworld to play dice with Demeter, and the verb is synkubein, te Demeteri. And then Plutarch says that Thoth, it's called Hermes in Plutarch's source, played dice, and the term is petia, with Selene, and won a sufficient proportion of moonlight to add 5 days to the year. And these days were the famous epagomenal days. Again, the knucklebones are not explicitly mentioned, but perhaps we can interpret this as knucklebones a bit more. Anyway, so Greco-Roman Egypt, of course, offers us many literary and documentary sources on papyri. So I decided to look for the Greek term Astragalus among the papyri in the papyri info, of course. And I've found some attestations of gazelle knucklebones in a papyri of the 3rd century BC archive of the Carian Zenon, who was a very important man. He was the private secretary of the Minister of the Finances of the time. And in one of the papyri, the knucklebones are mentioned because they were handed over by one commercial agent of Zenon in a sealed bag. And I was a bit curious about this sealed bag. I thought perhaps this bag is similar to the knucklebone bag used by the Greeks called formiskos. This bag is mentioned by Plato and is often represented in the hands of children on Hellenistic terracottas, especially from the 4th century. And you can see a reconstruction of the Formiscos in a terracotta from Thebes, and it's at the Louvre. So in another papyrus, Zenon's brother Epharmostos is expecting to receive a set of dice, a set of knucklebones, by a certain Eutychus, but it does not bring them, and so Epharmostos is a bit frustrated about it, but finally he receives them from Ephesus. So really, a really precious item that people really want. And finally, we have another source from the archive of Zenon that says an unknown correspondent of Zenon lets him know that there is a craftsman who also worked at the royal court of the Ptolemies. And this craftsman, royal craftsman, was making these knucklebones out of gazelle bones. So they were very precious objects. This is what we can conclude, really. So all the examples from the Zenon archive seem to be gazelle knucklebones, possibly without decoration. But there are Egyptian knucklebones from the Ptolemaic period onwards that are made of bone, but also of stones such as gabbro and serpentine, or gold even. And they do have decorations, or they are all carved. Unfortunately, all the ones that I found did not have a precise archaeological context. So we don't know where they were found and whether one or more pieces were used. There are gaming pieces possibly possibly dating to the Ptolemaic period. This is not entirely certain, which have been shaped like baboons, as you can see here, and ithyphallic dwarfs, but they still retain a knucklebone shape. Such decorations on the knucklebones clearly indicated that these were not normal gaming pieces. They might have had a ritual function of some sort. However, these two baboons, and yes, they are two. Normally, you can only see one from the Metropolitan Museum's catalog, but I went to check the original publication by Arnold, and I was very pleased to find that it's a set of two. Apparently, these two baboons are from an imported species of baboons. They're not Egyptian baboons. The species is called Papio Anubis. And I like the fact that Arnold said that they also assume an attitude of beggars. So she said that they are also representing a sort of urban grotesque figure of beggars. So we can agree with this or not, but it's an interpretation. If we look outside Egypt in the Greco-Roman world, knucklebones can be found in various archaeological contexts, caves, sanctuaries, graves, and domestic quarters. A clear indication that these objects were used for play is described in a large variety of Greek and Roman sources. But you can also see that in terracottas and statues that depict the players. It was a game for both adults and children. And among adults, it was associated with a symposium, for example, or with gambling. Young girls were often represented playing knucklebones, especially on Hellenistic terracotta figurines dated between the 5th and the 4th century BC, especially. And these represented both individual girls, also group of girls. For example, there was one of the games played by this girl that was called the game of the 5 stones. We do have lots of information about these games, also thanks to an author called Pollux. And according to Pollux, the game of the 5 stones was a game of skill where the knucklebones were thrown up into the air, and then an attempt was made to catch them on the back of your hand. If you only were partly successful, you had to pick up the knucklebones which had fallen on the ground without dropping the ones already on your hand. And you can see a very nice reconstruction of this game in the Locus Ludi website. I will mention it at the end. The other group of girls on the right seems to be playing on a circular board, simply drawn on the ground. And this is just to show you another popular and widespread depiction of female knucklebone player on Hellenistic terracottas, and with Roman copies as well. So knucklebones were not just games for girls, but because group of boys were also represented. And the boys represented on this Attic oinokoi, judging from their positions, are probably playing a game called the omilla, the circle game, where they needed to throw the knucklebones into a sort of circular space drawn on the ground. And at the same time as throwing the knucklebones, they had to try to knock out the ones of their adversaries. It is possible, I found this nice interpretation in one of the articles by Barbara Carré. It is possible that one of the boys depicted on this oinokoi is cheating and trying to move a knucklebone out without being seen, but is called out by another one. So the scene from this oinokoi seems like the beginning of a little argument rather than an outburst of violence. But it appears that such a game could become particularly competitive among boys. In the Iliad, Patroclus says that when he was a child, he became so angry after a game of knucklebones, you can see the expression in Greek means full of bile, that he killed his companion. And the aggressive behavior related to this game can also be seen from this fragmentary statue held at the British Museum, where two boys are violently quarreling. Beside the violent argument, there is an element of strong attachment to knucklebones that emerges from the ancient sources. In an Hellenistic dedicatory epigram from the Antologia Palatina, or Greek anthology, a boy's dedication of toys includes his knucklebones that seem to be his most precious possessions. The text says that he had such a mania for them, and the verb is epimaino, to be mad after. So it's really a strong expression. Knucklebones could also be prizes given to children in competitions. And for instance, another epigram from Book 6 of the Antologia Palatina says that the boy Conarus won 80 knucklebones at a writing competition. So here we have also this other very interesting element of boys' literacy. So that a boy could win such a big prize in knucklebones thanks to demonstrating his literacy and his ability to write. Considering how important these objects were to some children, it is not surprising that knucklebones and terracotta of knucklebone players were also found in tombs of children. These terracottas of a girl playing knucklebones and a boy holding a formicos bag are both from the 4th century BC Hellenistic, from a 4th century Hellenistic tombs attributed to children. We don't know much about the child buried in the tomb in Eretria, so because only the objects are attested, we don't have much information about the tomb. So scholars have attributed this burial to a child based on the objects found in it. On the contrary, the sister tomb from Amphipolis was found intact with a small number of objects and is said to belong to a girl aged about 11 years old. Knucklebones were also used for divination, and there are attestations in sanctuaries from, for example, Greece or Asia Minor. Divination was performed by asking the statue of a god a question and then casting the dice. This practice can be observed in coins such as this one from Samos, where you can see a couple of children interrogating the statue of Hera and then casting the knucklebones. In the context of statue divination, the throw of Aphrodite was also valued as a good omen. This practice is also recalled by a tragicomic episode of Pseudo Lucian's Amores, or Affairs of the Art, So it's a funny episode because a boy falls in love with the statue of Aphrodite of Cnidus, and throws the knucklebones in front of her to find out whether he can satisfy this desire for her. I want to reveal you the final, you probably know, but the story has a bit of an awkward twist in the end. So the theme of love, mania, and knucklebones becomes very clear if we consider that there was a long-lasting association between Eros and the knucklebones. In the poet, the archaic poet Anacreon says that the dice of Eros are madness and uproar. So kudoimoi means fight, uproar. So Eros, so it really expresses two of the feelings that we have seen before: the wrath for the dice, and also the madness for the dice, and the connection with love madness perhaps as well. And Eros dominates a 5th century knucklebone shaped vase that was produced in Athens in the mid 5th century BC. There are other knucklebone shaped vases from this period as well, but I only found this one that represented the Eros. Finally, I'm going to conclude by mentioning two of the most extreme finds, archaeological finds of knucklebones. One from a cave in Greece and one from a necropolis in the south of Italy. So thousands of knucklebones were found in the Corician cave on the slopes of the Mount Parnassus in central Greece in the 1970s, most by the entrance of the cave. The majority were without decorations, although many others had modifications. They could have been even more, but the cave was continuously used for hundreds of years. So the objects were either displaced or damaged very often. More than 2,000 of these knucklebones had holes, which suggests that they were either worn as an amulet, but more likely, according to the author Amandri Pierre, they were originally used as game pieces and then perhaps dedicated as votive pieces. Some holes were found to be filled with lead, and the author also suggests that perhaps they were not just votive because they don't have names of deities inscribed on them. And also the same decoration can be on these knucklebones, can also be found in knucklebones found in living spaces and such as sanctuaries and urban spaces. So in the same area. So this is another example, the one really that gives the talk the title really. And it's the name derives from the German archaeologist Roland Hampe that creates this term Astragalomanie, obsession for the knucklebones, when he was referring to the southern Italian site of Locri. In this site, 8,800 knucklebones were found in Locri's necropolis of Contrada Lucifero. This is the area. 11 tombs had, in particularly, had hundreds of knucklebones, both inside or outside the tombs. And one of the most impressive tombs was tomb number 587, which had 507 knucklebones on the tiles that covered the tomb, while only one knucklebone was included inside the tomb behind the skull. And in tomb 348, the knucklebones formed a protective cordon around the skulls, the left hips, and they also united the two bodies in a way. So the examples from Locri are unique in terms of high numbers, so they cannot be used for general statements about the use of knucklebones in the Greek world, the ancient world in general. But the studies by Keren and Elia also show that such pieces there were mainly in tombs of adults as well, which I found very interesting. Both men and women, and how do we distinguish that they were men and women also by the presence of gendered objects, such as mirrors for women and the strigil for men. It was also noticed that knucklebones seem to have had a prevalent funerary role in Locri, because they were found in tombs and not so much in the living areas, such as the urban space and the sanctuaries, and these were very well studied. I'd like to conclude this talk on Egyptian and Greco-Roman knucklebones with a slide showing that play with astragale, with knucklebones, continued to be popular and ubiquitous throughout history, as shown by the paintings of Bruegel, the Elder, and the Chardin, for example. But there are many other examples. I really selected a couple. But on the contrary, if you notice, the painting by Frederick Leighton does not attest a contemporary game, but rather an ancient Greek scene, which is inspired by the Hellenistic terracottas that you have just seen, and that the painter also had the chance to appreciate, perhaps at the British Museum. So by choosing the Hellenistic terracotta, he reproduced the calmer side of the knucklebone play, certainly not the boyish play, which, as we have seen, was often involved strong emotions and compared by the sources to mania and rage, were really defined as very strong emotions. Okay, so I don't have real conclusions to this paper because, as I said, it's an overview, so we can have a discussion. But before I finish, I wanted to show you a few sources. If you have become passionate about Astragalo, knucklebones, unless you are already an expert about it. These are some sources that you can look up. There is a forthcoming book that will really encompass lots of different sources on knucklebones in Greece and south of Italy, and it's the book Astragalomania by Barbara Carré. And there is a very important book on Egyptian senet and the board games in general, where knucklebones are also discussed, which is the book by Christ Dunn and De Vogt. And I also wanted to, so obviously the articles by Piccione and Tate, these are only a couple of them. There are lots, but these are the names to look at. And I'd like to show you Locus Ludi. And this is a project run by Veronique Dezen, the University of Fribourg. And I know that many of you are passionate about ancient games and games in the ancient world. So I would like you to, have a look. And also there are some amazing reconstruction of knucklebone play. So you can really see lots of beautiful things there. And there is a catalog which is connected to this project, which is Ludic. And there are knucklebones there as well. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. And yeah, look forward to your questions.